Your goal is to help them become the best humans they can become because of the love you have for them. But what if we actually looked at other people that way? So instead of trying to get something from them all the time, we actually had this unconditional love that we wanted to see them become the best that they could become. And then the odds of us becoming frustrated because we told them the same thing, how to overcome the same objection 32 times or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. It's like you get less frustrated because you know that, hey, it only takes once. And I don't know about you, but I remember it was like I got older and I'd be like, oh, that's what my mom was trying to tell me.
Starts to click, yep.
Yeah, just one day. And then I realized it forever. She'd been telling me 20 years, and then it just took one moment. And all of a sudden, for 20 years that I ignored it, didn't listen to it, but it worked. And what if
But she never gave up. She kept saying it.
Yep, what if she gave up?
Welcome back to another episode of Just Real Quick. I'm your host, Jefferson K. Rogers. In the studio with me, my partner in crime, Jeff Fieldstad.
It's good to be back, man.
It's been a little while since we put together a podcast. There's been a lot of exciting things happen in the world of JKR Windows. We're going to talk about some of those things today as we discuss leading leaders. What does it take to lead leaders, and what's the difference between leading leaders and just leading normal?
Or managing, right? I think most people's perspective of leadership is actually management.
Most people. I think you're correct in that assumption because most people have never experienced leadership.
Right.
And their only example of it is, the difference between a shitty manager and a manager that they had a decent relationship with.
Yeah. Yeah, and most people's experience is usually in corporate America where they got a job and what they viewed as their leader was actually a manager who was being paid to tell them what to do or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
And there's a difference when it comes to leading somebody, even if you're leading somebody who's necessarily not a leader. But I think if they're being led by a true leader, eventually that leader's goal is to pass that baton and help duplicate and develop another leader, right?
100%. And it's something for me that I caught in one way or another when I was early on in sales. And it was like this opportunity for me to not have to be a grinder and have to be the top salesman and have to just do this for the rest of my life. Like I was watching other people that were 10, 20, 30 years ahead of me have to do, like out of necessity. They hadn't developed themselves as leaders, and they had to go out and start over tomorrow again, like they had been doing for the past 30 years.
Right.
That was not something that I was interested in.
Yeah, I think for whatever reason, I mean, I caught it early on too. I think mine was out of a little bit different reason, is I probably didn't have the self-esteem in myself that I could be the best salesperson forever. I knew I was willing to do it, but it was far outside of my comfort zone and it wasn't in my natural talent. But it was like I knew I could learn to sell. I knew I could learn to ask the right questions. I knew I could learn to close and get great at it. But it wasn't the thing that I loved the most. I loved the winning and competition and seeing me transfer my skills into somebody else and let them use that to impact their life in a positive way. And early on, that's what I started getting little glimpses of. And I heard this story early on in my career of, and I don't know if it's like an old Indian proverb or whatever, where the grandpa is talking to his grandson and says, hey, you see the two wolves out there in the distance and they're fighting right now. And the grandson asks his grandpa which one wins. And he says, well, one of them is fear, envy, greed, jealousy, all these negative emotions. And the other one is love, passion, excitement, joy, happiness. And he says, well, which one wins, Grandpa? And he said, whatever one you feed. And so I heard that story early on in my career and never forgot that it was like the things that I was naturally having fun at. If I could feed those things, I could separate myself from most people. And I think that's how I caught it, is early on. I was like, I knew I could learn sales, and I did. I got really good at it. But it also wasn't the thing that gave me this separation from passion, where I was just obsessed about doing this thing. That was transferring my skills into other people and watch them use that to hit their goals. And it was like, man, I could do this forever, you know?
yeah, you got energy from it in a different way
Yes.
than just this tool that you had to go make money.
Yes.
Which in the sales world, there's not as much talk about it. That's why we talk about this kind of stuff, because, you know, whether or not I really, looking back that long ago and grasped it like that, the way that I just explained it, or if it was like a seed that was planted and it was cultivated and then I started to recognize things differently, I think that's more likely what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. I mean, that's what happens is we're in an environment long enough and eventually we become like that environment, right?
Because early on, all I was focused on was I didn't want to do what I was doing as a mechanic or having to go back to be a carpenter. I knew I could go back and do that. That was like my plan B. I was good at it. I could get paid a salary or some type of a wage to go back and do that whenever. But I knew that my future and the potential of me being able to provide a different quality of life for my family was in sales.
Yeah.
And then little by little, starting to see these examples helped me start to realize that my future is not in sales, it's in leadership. And I've got some of these things naturally. The rest of them are going to have to be developed over time, because there was a lot of things that I was naturally not good at because the way that I was raised under my parents' leadership and their management style. And that automatically is what trickles over into your style.
And they're great people, by the way.
100%.
They're amazing people, but they just learned, it was just different, right?
Just different, different style.
Yep.
That worked for me. It molded me into the man and the manager and the leader that I was, the older brother, all these things that were a huge benefit to me.
Yeah.
But as I started to try and implement those things into a sales team and take the brand newest person that had came from a very similar place that I had just came, and expect them to respond the way that I had responded to my parents, in this, the loving, encouraging way that they whipped me into shape.
Yeah.
It turns out it doesn't work all that well.
Well, it's funny because you say that when you go into sales, and it's like, I think a lot of times people have these plan Bs or they're just scared to give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've always told people is like, hey, if you're going to go get a job, like let's say you went to school, got good grades, got an education, got a good job like everybody says you should do. And then you say, you know what, maybe I want to get into sales. And people have said the highest paying career is in sales, which I halfway agree with, because I actually think the highest paying career is sales leadership, right? Mm-hmm. Teaching other salespeople, which is why you got to get good at sales so you can duplicate it. But then the duplication factor is what matters most. But it's like when someone does that, they went and got this degree and they're not making the money they thought they were going to make at a job, or it's not what they thought it would be, and they felt like they put in all these years. It's like, what's the worst that could happen? You can always go back and get another job, but you don't always get more time in your life to go chase a dream and to find out really what you're made of, right? So I think it's important for people, if anybody's listening to this, to say, maybe you are scared, maybe you're nervous, maybe sales or leadership is uncomfortable for you, but you can always go back and get another job. I mean, the worst thing that could happen, I mean, a lot of people, if you go to a job, you've been working at corporate America, you went and worked at whatever, Walmart or Best Buy or a hospital or whatever. I talked to a guy the other day who was working at Kaiser, and he's been there for a lot of years. And it's like, you can look around at guys that have been there for 30 years, and that's your future. And is that really what you want? And if that's what you want, then you should do it. But if it's not, the worst thing that would happen is you come, try sales, find out maybe maybe you suck at it. Maybe you're horrible at it. Maybe you go through a lot of challenges and trials, and maybe you're just not built for it, because not everybody is. And then, hey, you can always go back and do that, just like that dude that's been there 30 years. But what if you become great at it? What if you learn the skills? What if you make more money than you ever imagined possible, right? What if, I used to tell people all the time, it's like, can you imagine Steve Jobs when he started selling the iPhone? And it was like a phone with no buttons. And you say, man, one day people are going to have 10,000 songs in their pocket, or whatever his line was. Mm-hmm. And people are, it's like, what if he'd have said, what if people won't buy an overpriced phone? The question is, what if they will, right? Mm-hmm. And the question, what if they will, changed everything.
Yeah.
Well,
it changed the trajectory of my life, because what if all of the things that I'd been told my whole life about sales weren't true?
Right.
because we've been conditioned, whether you realize it or not, you've been conditioned to think a certain way about sales and about corporate America and about what your possibilities are coming from the family that you came from. And the cool opportunity that we have as leaders that changed my life from one of my leaders was he helped me see things in myself that I didn't necessarily see yet at that time.
Yep.
And, when we're talking about leading versus leading leaders, there's some of these things that excited me early on once I started to grasp the impact that you can have on people's lives, that I could do that same thing for somebody.
Right.
They came from a similar background as me, whether it was construction or working at a restaurant or being a mechanic. I immediately could relate to where all these people were, and now saw that I had done it, and why couldn't they do it? Because as a leader, building a company or building a team, it was also highly beneficial to me to bring them in and teach them these things, and there was more possible for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I changed their lives forever too about what was possible for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think it's an important perspective change to look at people. And I see this a lot with managers. They'll do interviews and they'll be like, oh, they're not the right person. Well, why not? Oh, well, they don't have this, or this. But a leader doesn't look at a person and say they're not the right person. A leader looks at a person and say, could they become the right person? Mm-hmm. Do they have the desire? Do they want to do something special with their lives? Do they have goals? Do they have dreams? Are they willing to change? You don't catch a fish expecting it to be filleted, right? You still got to do some work. You got to put in the work catching a fish, but then you got to fillet the fish. You got to cook the fish. Same thing as with leadership.
And how often do we see new leaders that get fatigued by these things that more established leaders have just come to terms with, like having to do the same exact thing and say the same exact thing over and over and over?
Yeah. I've always told people it's the key to winning in leadership is saying the same thing to new people. Mm-hmm. But if you try to say the same thing to the same people, it's frustrating. But you say the same thing to a new person, and once in a while their eyes light up and they go, man, I found it. Like, this is what I've been looking for.
Yes.
That's when you get that like emotion, like, man, it's amazing. But you try to say the same thing to old people who've been around forever, and you're just like, man, it just doesn't hit right.
Yeah, depending on what it is, because my message hasn't changed much over the past 6 years since I started J.K.R. Windows. It's really a lot of the same things. My same philosophy, my values are all the same. I just have gotten, I've read books and I've gotten more experience and I'm more eloquent in the way that I talk about some of those things. But there's a difference between that and training and managing and being frustrated with people and lacking patience in people, because now you're saying this for the 12th time and it's like, when are you ever going to get this?
Yeah.
I just need somebody else that's going to get it.
You know what helped me a lot early on with that is because I did get frustrated with people. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've had to work on is my compassion. It's like, yeah, it's tough. So what? Like, that's what it's supposed to be.
That's what they need to hear.
Yeah. It's like that, but that's not what I'm trying to get across, right? That's just how I viewed it. But I'll never forget Brandon Neal told me one time, he said, Jeff, you've got to love people like you love your children. Like, you tell your children the same thing over and over, and your children probably even sometimes say, I hate you or whatever. And you're not going to be like, oh, yeah, you're to your 6-year-old, you said you hate me, get out, Yeah.
No. Find somebody else to take care of you then.
Yeah, no, you love them unconditionally. Your goal is to help them become the best humans they can become because of the love you have for them. But what if we actually looked at other people that way? So instead of trying to get something from them all the time, we actually had this unconditional love that we wanted to see them become the best that they could become. And then the odds of us becoming frustrated because we told them the same thing, how to overcome the same objection 32 times or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. It's like you get less frustrated because you know that, hey, it only takes once. And I don't know about you, but I remember it was like I got older and I'd be like, oh, that's what my mom was trying to tell me.
Starts to click, yeah.
Yeah, just one day. And then I realized it forever. She'd been telling me 20 years, and then it just took one moment. And all of a sudden, for 20 years that I ignored it, didn't listen to it, but it worked. And what if
But she never gave up. She kept saying it.
Yep, what if she gave up? Then I wouldn't have got that thing that was important, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't have went, oh, my gosh.
And you know what? I've got example after example of people that early on in my career, I didn't do it very well with, and I blew them out of the water. I didn't have the patience, and I saw something in them which led me to spending time with them, but then gave up too early on them because of my lack of patience. But then later on in my leadership career, being able to take the time that was necessary and understand that not everybody's going to learn it as fast as I do or as fast as the last guy did doesn't mean that they're less capable or they don't have it in them. You're just going to have to spend more time. And some of the very best and highest producers in my company throughout the history of JKR Windows have taken more time. And it wasn't going to be set the expectations. They come in the next day with the whole thing memorized and they're good to go and we can just put them straight out on the doors. They're going to be self-sufficient. That is not the way things work in the real world.
No.
That is 10%, maybe less of people that we bring in through a system. No matter how great your system is, 10% of them are going to be that easy. The rest of the 90% are going to take some extra time and attention and understanding and compassion about their situation they may be going through. And there's all kinds of different variations of that because, even something I went through last week. If I had gone through that at a period of my life where I was in the middle of a transition, I was looking for an opportunity, and then somebody just blew me out of the water because I had a personal thing happen.
Yeah.
They would have wasted a great opportunity. To bring me onto their team.
Yeah, it's interesting because if the system of bringing great people in brought them in ready to go, then it would be all of the smartest people, the most intellectually smart people that succeed. But it's usually not those people that win big. Mm-hmm. Usually the stories that inspire us and the books we read aren't like the most IQ, intellectually smart people that won big. In fact, it was quite the opposite. We look at them and go, man, like you look at Andrew Carnegie, for example. He had a second grade education. And if he was alive today, would be a trillionaire. He built this incredible business. And it wasn't necessarily the system. It was his ability to get the best out of people. Mm-hmm. That allowed him to build that great business, but they didn't come in that way. No. Right? He gives in one of Napoleon Hill's books, he gives the story about J.P. Morgan,
Charles
Schwab. That's right, Charles Schwab, and developing him into this incredible person. And his name today is in buildings all over in every town in America.
Yep.
And it took time, and it took believing in him. And I'll bet Charles Schwab could have said maybe he was smarter intellectually than Andrew Carnegie. But yeah, you look at the business Andrew Carnegie built. So it's not necessarily the system that brings in people ready to go. It's the people that develop other people that separate themselves. If it was easy, everybody would do it, man. It's not easy. That's what creates the opportunity, is developing people's hard.
That's why we talk about this stuff, though, because it's exciting and there's the opportunity there, and not everybody's going to be ready for it. At one point in my career, it sunk in, and all of a sudden my focus changed a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was no longer just going to go after this one initiative. Now it was, I remember picking up my first book on leadership, and it was the 5 levels of leadership. And it was really uncomfortable because I'm reading through the first level and the second level. I'm like, dude, I got so far to go. This is just kind of looking myself in the mirror now and like, okay, how serious are you about this leadership journey? Because look how far you're going to have to go to get to even levels 3, let alone 4 and 5 and be at the pinnacle of leadership. I'm still on that journey.
Yeah.
But that got me freaking fired up. But I could have very well stayed on that path that we see a lot of salespeople do, where it's all right there. Like all of that shit, all of those books, all of this awareness is just right there within their grasp. And they're still just like, they got the blinders on. They're focused on a bunch of shit that it's going to keep them down this similar path, doing the same exact thing forever.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times what happens is you'll meet these people that got really good at something, especially in sales, and they maybe did it for a few years and maybe made some money, and then they got burned out from doing this, trying to develop people, and realize, hey, I'm going to have to do this forever. And they get defeated. And so I would encourage anybody listening to this that don't get defeated because you make some mistakes trying to develop people, like blowing people out early on. Have some humility and realize that, hey, if you're humble and go, yep, I made a mistake, and I probably shouldn't have treated that person this way or said that thing, or when this situation happened, that was where you had the opportunity to get better. And the leaders are willing to go through that situation and come out better on the other side through learning and handling it and willing to go through that same situation again and testing their pride and testing their ego and saying, did I get better this time?
Yeah, such an important factor in growth, because I'll bet I had a lot of these experiences. I was paying attention to how people responded and how they felt about how I treated them. And some people wouldn't be aware enough to take the lessons from that, be able to grow. But what happened in those moments, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is you blew people out of the water. You handled things a certain way. And then after a little bit of self-reflection was like, I sure don't want to make anybody feel like that ever again.
Yep.
And I'm going to adjust it. And it accelerates the process.
You know what, dude? It's going through that process and blowing people out and saying the wrong things, not having the compassion I should have had for people's situations was actually why I started falling in love with self-improving and reading constantly, because it's like I would say something to somebody thinking it was the right thing. My intentions were correct. My communication skills of how to motivate that person to get what they really wanted. I wanted them to have what they really wanted. But a lot of times it's just like I would say the totally wrong thing and blow them out. But then it was like I'd read a book that night, and for whatever reason in that book was this exact situation that just happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I messed that one up. I should have handled it right. Or I should have handled it this way. It would have turned out better. And that's
too bad it doesn't work like that, though.
It doesn't. That's the process of learning.
Because you could have read that the day before, before making that perceived mistake, and it would have never been applicable. You would have never had that awareness that you needed to use it in that way. But afterwards, with the pain and all the things that had been caused by the way that you handled it, was this new awareness.
Yep, that's exactly right. Which is why it's important to go through these challenges while self-improving, because self-improving means nothing if you're not willing to go through the challenges. Just like yesterday we were talking about working out.
And we see so many people that read book after book after book, but they never go out there and experience life and apply these things to be able to get anything from it.
Yes, you have to be willing to go through the challenges while you're self-improving. Otherwise, you're not actually improving yourself. You're just reading information, right? So it is important to be willing to fail forward and mess up and have some humility and know that nobody expects you to be perfect. Even your team doesn't expect you to be perfect. They just expect you to try, right? Just get better. Just like sometimes, like I tell my son, and I've learned this too, sometimes the best thing you can do when you make a mistake is just say, I'm sorry. Like I messed up, know? And then that opens it up for the opportunity to say, okay, now how can I get better so I don't do the same thing? And early on in my career, dude, I refused to say I was sorry because I had this low self-esteem and I had to prove that I was perfect and I knew I could do this. And I was actually just trying to prove it to myself. But a lot of times it came out wrong to other people, It's interesting how
that is interesting.
Journeys go. And this what we're talking about is the difference of what somebody has to go through to become a leader, to attract a leader.
Yes.
Because a lot of times what somebody wants to do as a leader is they want to not lead people and do it first and get better and make mistakes and improve and treat people good and get what's best for them. Instead, they want to tell people what to do. Do this or else. Show up or else.
That's your level 1 leader.
Yeah.
That book it's so valuable to me, and I haven't read it in a few years now, but it's just thinking through the subject today and talking about the beginning stages of leadership and how you get there and failing forward and accelerating the process. Those are all things that are going to be necessary for you to get to that next level. In level 2, level 3, becoming a high producer, proving yourself, leading from the front. Now, level 4 is leading leaders. You get to a point now where you've proved yourself, you've got a reputation, you've got a skill set and ability to communicate with people and inspire. And now it's a whole new level of leadership that's going to be required at a certain point in business, because now it's not just you being the grinder and having to do everything. For you to be able to truly scale, whether it's your sales team or your business, you got to be able to lead leaders. And you said this right before we jumped on. You can't manage leaders.
Right. Leaders don't want to be managed.
I know I don't want to be managed.
Yeah, no.
And if you want to be able to have an opportunity with great leaders, You've got to inspire them. You've got to give them a little bit of creative freedom. And you got to let them implement shit the way that they want to implement it.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier today too. It's like people having a personal management philosophy. Not everybody, just like families. You know, if anybody listening to this has kids, you know, before you had kids, you're like, I'm never going to let my kids do this, or my kids are going to do this. And then you realize like, oh, they have their like own free will. I mean, they're almost, you know, you can't control them. They're humans. All you can really do is lead children, right? And a lot of times we think that we're going to be able to manage every little thing our kids do, and we might while they're in our presence. But as soon as they leave, they're going to do whatever they want to do. And I was talking to my son's teacher yesterday, and, you know, my son wants to talk in class. And I'm like, I was never that kid. I slept through class. I never talked. And he's like, Dad, didn't you ever get in trouble for talking in class? I'm like, no, like never. In fact, I got in trouble for the opposite, sleeping in class, right? So no, son, I don't understand that challenge. And the teacher said, he's the only kid in class we have this challenge with. And he said, well, Dad, when am I supposed to talk to my friends, you know? And so we started talking to the teacher and just about what it is that motivates him. And really, he just has this spirit where he hates being controlled, but he also loves structure. So as I started talking to her about it, he loves structure, but he hates being controlled. And she said, well, isn't that like everybody? I'm like, well, yes, but some people, we just respond to it differently. We see control differently, right? So, you know, we have this conversation with him and just teaching him, hey, here's why other kids are trying to focus. It's not out, your teacher's not trying to control you. She's trying to provide a great environment for the other kids. And then you can see him going through it like, oh, man, sorry, you know? And I think a lot of times with leaders too, we naturally have this like think outside of the box spirit. It's like, hey, I want to do this. I don't want to do this. But there are some times where we got to operate within inside of a framework so that we're providing the best example for people that maybe don't have these natural talents that we have, so that they can still come into an environment and they can still succeed by following our lead, and then giving them time to build their own personal management philosophy, and they can run it the way they want to run it and be passionate about it and do it long term.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard something I'm reading Ego is the Enemy. I heard something this morning that Frank Shamrock, he's a famous MMA fighter and coach, and he runs a gym, or at least used to when this book was around, and he talks about his philosophy and how do you take somebody that maybe is already good and help them get to the next level. And you can really apply this to any level of leadership. And he calls it the plus, minus, and equal. So for me, I know it's been very important to surround myself with people that are ahead of where I am.
Yep.
Because those people are typically they're gonna encourage you, and they're gonna give you energy, and they're gonna point out things that most people wouldn't point out because they're just at a different level of a relationship with you. But it's always been, or at least looking back, it's been so important for me to have myself surrounded by great people that are going to stretch me.
Yep.
But then he also says that it's equally as important to surround yourself with people that are lower than you, that you can help teach all the things that you've learned and help solidify all that. And then to surround yourself with people that are at the same level as you.
Yep.
So then you can challenge each other and you've got some competition.
Yep. You'll learn better from, you're going to learn better when you learn something to teach it to somebody, which is why having, in your words, someone lower than you, I just always use the pupil and the peer, right? You have peers that are, at your same level. We're competing with our peers and they push us to be better. We want them to win so we can beat them by $1, and then we have pupils that they want to learn from us. We want to provide that example. We want to do great. And then we have to, everything we're learning, we have to be able to communicate it in a way that's simple enough for them to understand it. And then you have these people ahead of you that you strive to be like, right? Your mentors and people that inspire you from their lifestyle. I look at guys like Phil Jackson. I wrote this down. Phil Jackson and Nick Saban. Think about Phil Jackson, dude. He had to coach guys like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman together. Can you imagine trying to coach those egos and their personalities, and then to get those guys to come together and work together to go win championship after championship and championship? And then if you listen to them talk about that man, and how they talked about him was incredible. But then he didn't just do it with the Bulls. He went on the Lakers to go do it with Shaq and Kobe. I mean, can you imagine coaching those two guys too? And being the kind of person that can make them better? You know, like
And make two guys like that work together.
yes, like it's incredible. And then a guy like Nick Saban, who's had more people go to the NFL from his college football program than any other coach in history, and getting these big personalities and bold guys that are aggressive and goal-oriented and showed up to his program already ready to go, but yet come out a better person and then praise and recognize him for being the greatest coach. I think you look at leaders like that, and both of those guys, I think I really admire, because Nick Saban isn't the guy who wants to take the light a lot of the times. He actually does a great job of shining it on his players, but at the same time, he has these principles and these philosophies that he's willing to share. He's constantly writing books. He's constantly doing interviews. His philosophies are very similar over the years. You can read a book that he wrote 20 years ago and read a book that he wrote a year or two ago, and the philosophies are very similar. And so it's like, you know, is he regurgitating the information? Yeah, but I think him writing that new information helps him just as much as it helps us. But it's also like, I look at leaders like that and go, man, he developed leader after leader after leader and after leader, and is admired and revered by those guys who everybody else looks up to, right? And I think for me, that's one of the goals that I always have is I don't want the spotlight. Rather than, I would rather shine the light on other people, see them become heroes.
That's the goal.
And if I can, if those heroes, I can play any part of their story, it's like, dude, what is better than that? You know what I mean?
So you know what that makes me think about? Because we're trying to get a message that we know is valuable to as many people as possible, and how do we get them to implement it? And I can't help but think, in as many years as I've been talking about this, how few people grasp it. And it's just like this, you got to come to terms with your message is not right for everybody. There's only a small percentage of people that it is going to be right for. But let's accelerate the process a little bit. Because in leadership, people a lot of times don't go that direction because they're so focused on, does that benefit me right now? And for me and for some people, we see past that because of the potential. And, you know, there's also other things that are just more important to us than others. And money obviously is important for my lifestyle and things like that. But what gave me the energy to go and put as many hours in as I have over the past 8 years was seeing that I could make an impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
And then over time, just like the little bit of progress that you're making as a leader through all of the repetitions and the failures, you've got to put your head down and just keep putting work in, and it will pay off.
Well, it's like a lot of times guys will focus on just making the money, which, don't get me wrong, you need to make money, right? But if you're good at sales, like I've always said, that if you have a great product and you're great at overcoming objections and you're willing to do the work, not making money is like being locked inside of a grocery store and starving to death. It's just stupid. You know, it shouldn't happen. You should make money. That's how, you know, it's kind of a measuring stick. But at some point, making money isn't going to be the thing that will drive you. It just won't. Once you've paid your bills and you have a roof over your head and food to eat, it's not going to drive you. If that's the case, if it was a driver, more people would be rich. But making a difference is a driver, right? Because then when you say, man, I've already made plenty of money, I'm already, you know, a millionaire multiple times over, then it's like, making a difference. So what about the money? Making a difference does keep me motivated. It does keep me engaged. It does keep me like outworking most people, because it isn't about the money. If it was about the money, it would have stopped a long time ago. But it's not about the money. It's about making a difference. So it allows me to show up earlier, stay later, be intense, be focused, because that's where I get my energy from if I'm trying to make a difference and just doing my best and impacting other people's lives. So I hope, you know, anybody listening to this, that when they listen about leading leaders, is being selfless, which is thinking about yourself less, right? Literally, selfless, thinking about yourself less, thinking about others more, putting them first. Zig Ziglar said, I said it yesterday, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get everything you want. And I believe in that statement with everything inside of me.
So the money is still there. You're telling me that money is still there.
It's a byproduct of leadership.
But how do we talk to people in a way to impress upon them when they're in this frame of mind where they're being selfish and they want it right now, and they see the money that they can make, and their perception is that if they take their eye off of this goal to go do this goal, there's no ROI there, or there's very little ROI, or the perception is that it's frustrating to me because I've seen it and I've lived it, and it's hard. Like, you want it worse for people than they want it, and I'm having a hard time communicating it.
Yeah, I think they still want it. Like, I don't think God created anybody with a lack of desire. I think it's belief. I always say our job as leaders is to raise hope and belief, right? A lot of times it's them having relationship, trust, which a lot of times just comes through being around you enough, because more is caught than taught. And so if they're around you, and I'm trying to think of the word when somebody's close to you constantly. I can't remember.
Proximity?
Proximity. Yes, proximity is the key to influence. You have to let people in. They've got to see your life, because you might on the outside, how many people on social media today, their life is awesome. And then if you really know them, you're like, their life is not that good, right? And then how many people are not on social media and you're like, why aren't you on social media, right? And that happens constantly, because a lot of times people that have the greatest lives don't want to be on social media bragging about their life, right? In fact, it's probably the opposite, because they realize it doesn't add to them, nor does it add to their people. So I think proximity, being around somebody so that they know you're the real deal, and then they realize, like, dang, I want to be like them. And you don't have to say, be like me. You just spend time with somebody, and naturally that stuff starts to happen. And you'll know it starts to happen if you're spending time around guys and all of a sudden they want to get in better shape. They want to start eating better. They want to stop drinking, or stop, stop chasing girls and start finding the one. We were just talking to someone the other day about this, right? And how important that is, which I think is another thing, right? This is another thing about salesperson. I want to bring this up real quick. We were having a conversation with someone the other day, and he said something. We were talking about finding the right one. And he said, all the girls that I date just want me to carve out time of my life, and I'm trying to chase my goals and dreams. And I said, well, the problem is, you'll find the one when they're not trying to carve out. They're actually trying to get you to go more all in. They're trying to get you to be more focused, and they're going to support you in chasing your goals. That's how you find the one. They're not trying to get you to slow down. They're trying to get you to speed up. And if you find someone who helps you speed up, then same thing. That's how you know she's the right one. But I also think it's the same thing with a leader. A lot of times salespeople get frustrated and fired up with a leader who says you got more inside of you, you can do more, you can focus more on this or that, and maybe they get fired up because they feel like it's maybe a detriment to what they're trying to accomplish. But there's somebody who's seeing it from a different perspective, saying, listen, you can go faster, you can do more, you can go harder, and you can achieve far bigger things than you believe you can right now.
Yep. And you can do that through leadership.
Yes.
Sales is a great place to get started because it'll get you out of your comfort zone, especially in door-to-door. So incredibly grateful that I got started in door-to-door when I did, because it got me out of this comfort zone that I was in, and it accelerated the process for me into sales and into leadership like nothing else that I could imagine or I've ever seen. And there's so many great examples of this in the door-to-door industry. Now, when it comes to leading leaders, you can't lead leaders until you yourself have become a leader, and you've got to start somewhere. It's going to take some time. You're going to have to develop. You're going to have to get your teeth kicked in a little bit. You're going to have to come to terms with the fact that you're going to F this up more times than you're not in the early stages. And even later on, as you start to work with leaders, it's a whole new style of leadership that you haven't had to do before. But we need leaders. The United States today is lacking strong leadership. And it's our responsibility as the leaders of this company and within the country and within our families to be that example and to instill those beliefs in our children and in the people around us. And no matter how many times and how fucking frustrating it is for me because people just don't catch it, I'm still going to be saying the same thing years from now because it's important to me and we need it. And if you want to focus on your sales thing, go right ahead. You're going to make a great income, but just plan on be doing that fucking 25 years from now.
Here's what I would say. A tree, you look at like a redwood tree, it doesn't struggle to grow or tell everybody how big it is. It just gets big as hell, and then people come show up to look at it and all. And if you want to become a big leader, you've just got to decide, I'm going to be a leader. This is what I'm going to do. And you don't have to try to talk anybody into getting big. You just do it, right? And the right kind of people are going to be attracted. The right kind of people are going to love your message. And if you lead, which leadership is influence, and if you use that influence in a positive way to achieve goals and dreams and talk to people about making their lives better, and you do those things and you get big, I promise you, people show up in awe like, dang, I can't believe you did it. You know, because like Brandon Neal the other night we were at dinner and he says, dude, the title of your book should be No Chance in Hell, you know, because we were just talking a little bit about my story, you know. And when I think about those things, like to me, it's irrelevant how my childhood was, because maybe it gave me some desire or whatever. But what's important is it doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, male or female, what color you are, none of that matters. What really matters is just you have the desire. And as long as you have the desire, then you can wake up every day, get better, and you can transform your life. And then if you are a leader and you decide to influence others, then you're going to transfer into other people's lives. And those positive habits are naturally going to make you look incredible. You know, it's like I always said, momentum is powerful, and you'll start getting momentum because the lack of momentum will make a strong leader look weak. But momentum will make a weak leader look strong. And this is why you got to get momentum on your side. And so maybe you're not a great leader right now, but these good habits that you're doing all of a sudden will create momentum, and you might not have this self-esteem. Like I was talking about early on in my career, I just didn't have this great self-esteem.
Yeah.
But momentum kept me going up and up and up and up, and I lose it sometimes, and I practice those fundamentals again and up and up and up and up. And then I look back at my career and like, dang, dude, it really worked.
It was working the whole time.
It was. I had to start over a few times and just really check my ego, my emotions, my philosophies, how to make some adjustments. But at the end of the day, it's just about having a desire to get better.
That's I think the separator is the desire. And as we wrap up here, even something that you just said to me is, I'm constantly looking for things, and we should all be, to help us change the way that we look at the world and perceive things. And Bob Proctor calls it our paradigm.
Yep.
Change our paradigm. And I love what you just said about it. It challenges my leadership philosophy and the way that I think about how I've approached this thing over the last couple of years. Because, you know, a lot of times, even in sales and in management, you want things more for people than they fucking want it for themselves.
Yeah.
But how about you just go do it and live it and be it and attract those people into your environment? There's a lot of power in that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, man. I'm glad it helps. Appreciate it, dude. That's why iron strengthens iron. So we get better rocking together, man. It's awesome.
Love it. Well, thank you guys for checking in. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the podcast. Share it with somebody who you think could benefit from this message today. My guy, Jeffrey Fieldstad, is always dropping some incredible wisdom. And we'll be coming back with more next time. Thank you for joining. Just real quick.